Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Pole Position Podcast. This podcast is going to be reviewing the Spanish Grand Prix, which saw Lewis Hamilton once again take victory in a battle that really saw the poor strategy decisions made by Red Bull. But we're going to go on to that in a few moments. I want to quickly mention, because obviously we did miss the Portugal Grand Prix, and obviously Jamie did that as a live stream for the Let's Talk Sport channel with Connor Porter as well. So I just wanted to quickly get your thoughts of the Portuguese Grand Prix as well, in terms of that was, again, Lewis Hamilton taking victory, but I think in that one he was a lot more comfortable in the Portuguese Grand Prix than he was, say, in the Spanish Grand Prix just gone.
I can't remember it. I don't know why, but that race felt like it was a good race, but compared to Spain, it was kind of done and dusted, wasn't it? You felt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was more of a response from Hamilton after Imola not going so right for him, even though he finished second after all the incidents he had in that race, which just shows how good he is at recovering. But you know, I think he won in Portugal last year as well, yeah. Hamilton. I might be wrong. So, you know, Portimao is just another circuit for him that he can claim that he's won at. And I think he's pretty much won at every circuit available at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely right. The reason why I didn't do a podcast for Portugal was simply because, obviously, I thought we'd do them back-to-back with them being a double-header. But it was like, well, there wasn't really much to discuss in terms of Portugal, simply because it was an okay race, like you said, but it was just a very comfortable win again for Lewis Hamilton. Overtook Valtteri Bottas with ease, as well as Max Verstappen, and sort of controlled the race from there. So a good few performances, but ultimately it saw Lewis Hamilton come out the victor once again. But this one, in terms of the Spanish Grand Prix, I mean, it was Max Verstappen's really to lose, and he did lose, but I wouldn't say it was down to it being his error. It was very much Red Bull made the wrong strategy call, and you mentioned it during the sort of race review at the end of our live stream on the Let's Talk Sport channel. But yeah, just a mix-up really, and a mistake by the Red Bull strategy once again, really.
I think there was a clip that they've just recently put on Sky Sports F1's YouTube channel, and it's the quote of "Your car was quickest." And I don't know who said it. It's between Toto Wolff and Christian Horner. But I have a feeling Toto Wolff said it to Christian Horner. And if so, that's just rubbing salt in the wound, isn't it? It's just kind of going, we won it. You didn't when it should have been yours. But if that is the case, then yeah, I think Red Bull have absolutely scuppered that up. I mean, the moment Hamilton went in for the pits, I honestly thought within the next lap or two, Verstappen would do the same. It was all... Yeah. I think that race was who does it first with that pit stop. And Mercedes at one point just went, look, we've got to pit at some point because these tyres will die out, which they did. And then Red Bull just kept going and going and going into the sunset for a bit. And after a while, they knew they had to come out of it and put that car into the pits. And they just did it way too late. And then late on in that race, with about 2 or 3 laps to go, he started off being 24 seconds behind Hamilton in second. And then about near the end, he was closing it to 15 seconds at least, which showed, you know, with fresh new tyres and the pace that car had, if they had done it with enough laps to go in that race, I think Verstappen would have at least gone onto the straight with Hamilton and at least battled for that lead. I'm not saying he would have won the race, but Red Bull were miles behind today. And I would have thought by now, with the fact that we've talked so much about Red Bull, not just this season, but last season, make bad decisions with their strategy, along with Ferrari when they were up there with Mercedes. It feels so frustrating to watch that. I don't know what their tactics were before the race. They might have stuck to it, but Mercedes are just kings at this, and they've done it again, which just shows that whatever you throw at Mercedes, they get the job done. And it's we've got to take our hats off to them, because they are literally throwing anything out of their way to keep their team top of the table.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it during the stream that obviously Red Bull made the first move in the pit stops, and then what happened was that Lewis Hamilton stayed out a bit longer than we thought he would have done, and we were like, oh, if Mercedes made a mistake, the rare mistake maybe that we've seen from a Mercedes team. But what they did was obviously prolong that first stint, came out on the second their second set of tyres, but again, like you said, weren't on that set long, and re-pitted again for another set of medium tyres, meaning that they would have fresher ones to track down Max Verstappen. And I don't know whether whether Mercedes thought that maybe Red Bull would make that call a couple of laps later, like you said, to maybe come in, and obviously they might get the jump on him that time round. But what happened was that, like you said, Red Bull didn't make any pit stop until he was overtaken, Max Verstappen, and then they just put him on a set of softs to get the fastest lap to sort of compensate on that. So, I mean, it was a weird one for me that Red Bull, like you said, didn't make a call that a couple of laps later they would box in and he would come back on. So it was a surprise one to me that, like you said, Red Bull didn't make the decision. It was just a huge error. Sort of Mercedes lucked themselves into it, and we mentioned it that the Hungarian Grand Prix a couple of years ago was exactly the same scenario, and Red Bull have fell into exactly the same trap, as it were. And Mercedes have got away with it again, with the sense that they've just put on a fresh set, tracked him down, and then that was it.
It's just a mess.
Yeah,
I mean, I just think sadly we're starting to see the gap get bigger.
Yeah.
Again, we've only had 4 races, and on paper we've still got 19 to go.
Yeah.
Which, so it shows how long the season can be. But I think you've got to have a good start against Mercedes in a championship, otherwise they will extend, because Mercedes have proven time and time again, ever since their first championship in 2014, they can last the whole season and be up there. Red Bull, I think, probably will as well, but will this be them in every race?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Some cars below them will get upgrades and see if they can close the gap on Red Bull at least, but I think we've got what we're going to have throughout the season. But it all comes down to how many more times can Verstappen accept being number 2 on the podium. And this is when you put it up on the channel, which was to look at Verstappen for next season for Mercedes if Hamilton retires this year. But it looks as though Hamilton recently come out and said he might race a bit more longer. So at some point Verstappen will want to look at it and think, well, if Mercedes offer me that contract, it's going to be hard to say no. Yeah,
especially if the performance is... Obviously, we don't know what happens going into 2022. It might be that Red Bull have an upper hand, or it might be that Mercedes have a more superior performance going forward. But Hamilton could just smell blood, couldn't he? As soon as he came out on them fresh tyres, he could smell there was a win coming.
I mean, I've just read here that Verstappen said he was a sitting duck.
Yeah.
And he actually defends Red Bull's strategy call, but...
Really?
That's
just to keep face, isn't it? That's just to keep face.
Yeah. He's trying to, in a way. I mean, look. Even if he is saying, I don't believe a word he's saying. If you ask me, I think deep down he will be hurt by that defeat, because that could have made it. I keep saying this scoreline, which may not mean anything at the moment, but he could have made it 2-2 with him and Hamilton.
Yeah.
Instead, it's 3-1 now. So, I think if you did that in your first 4 races, it shows why Red Bull are number 2. But look, he's going to defend it, I guess, because they're a team at the end of the day. It is a team sport. It's not down to one individual. And that's what Jenson Button said years and years ago when he was part of Brawn. It's not down to one individual. So I can understand him defending it because it's a long road ahead. But he said it was too slow. That's how you sum it up. He said there's not much else to really discuss. I tried really everything to manage it as good as I could. Looking after tyres and stuff, but it's just not enough when behind you. They're just pushing you, and you see there's clearly a bit more pace. But look, I'll say this now, as I said before, those last few laps when he did the pit stop, he was catching up on Hamilton, but just didn't have enough laps. So
yeah,
I can see what he's saying, but I have to disagree.
Yeah, I think they only made that call because they knew they weren't going to catch him once Hamilton had overtaken him. So they were like, well, we'll have to pit him now just to get fastest lap. So I think
at least they got. Because imagine if Perez had stuck to it. They'd have got the point for the wrong driver.
Yeah, but obviously going to Lewis Hamilton, 98th victory now in Formula 1. And I think it says here 5th straight win at the circuit. So obviously being dominant at the Barcelona circuit over the last few years. But yeah, 98th victory, 100 poles he got on Saturday, his 100th pole position. I mean, he's obviously breaking all the records going far forward. But yeah, that was, I don't want to say it was a gifted victory because obviously he had to chase Max Verstappen down. But I feel like it was very much more a mistake from Red Bull that gave Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes maybe the sniff of a victory, should I say.
Yeah, I think, that 100's coming in the next few weeks, I think. Which, to end your career with at least potentially 8 World Championships, 100 race wins and 100 pole positions at least. That's just mad.
Yeah.
That really is the new benchmark of, when Schumacher... I mean, it was mad to think back then we would say Michael Schumacher had 91 race wins, which just shows how consistent you have to be and how much time you have to put in it to be at the top. So, credit where it's due for Lewis Hamilton. And again, he just has that standard of if he doesn't win the race, he'll get second, or, regardless, he doesn't stop. He doesn't stop, even if the car isn't supposed to win on those circuits. And that's why he's got those race wins, because he's believed in the car and himself to still get the result that his team want in the garage. But yeah, it's a phenomenal achievement when he gets there, and he'll get there. I'll be surprised if he doesn't get 2 more race wins in his career. That's a cakewalk.
That would be a huge shocker, wouldn't it, if he didn't get them final 2 races?
Stops on 99.
But yeah, obviously mentioning them too, obviously they were in a class of their own, really, doing their own race. Valtteri Bottas very much trundling along on his own. There was one point, like you said, where Charles Leclerc, and we'll mention Charles Leclerc quickly in a minute, but Valtteri Bottas was overtaken by Charles Leclerc on the first lap and just couldn't get past him. It was another bit of a dismal performance from Bottas. Obviously, like you said, gets the most important thing for Mercedes, where he gets the 3rd place and gets the points. But for him personally, another very terrible performance, really, isn't it? Just in the sense that if he still believes, if he still believes that he is, in his own eyes, still fighting for this championship. He was nowhere near the other two, was he? So.
No. But when do we ever talk about Bottas being a racer? I've said this so many times where, he's a number 2 driver and he's a good team driver. Hence why you'll see Toto Wolff backing him and supporting him despite what the media said on Friday, which was, rumours of Mercedes thinking of replacing Bottas midway through the season for George Russell. So the fact that Toto Wolff's already put those claims down and under the carpet to say we have no intentions of doing that to Bottas shows, well, at least you're sticking to a system that's not broken. Why fix it? There's no point. And I think that's why Toto Wolff will forever, I'm sure, will have a lot of respect for Bottas for just being consistent in terms of at least being the guy that's up there to collect those secondary points and to help this team win so many constructors. Look, I'll say this now for Bottas. At least he'll have a CV to say he was part of the best team in those years. So he's another Rubens Barrichello, and I joke about it when you hear it, but he is. He'll never get to another. He'll never get to a world championship. He just doesn't have it in him to do it, I don't think. The Imola incident was unfortunate in a way. I don't think that was his fault. I still think that was more Russell's. I just think that with Bottas, like I said, there's just no racer in him. When do you ever see him go up against Leclerc or Hamilton and beat them, or Verstappen? I mean, send me the video clips if he has, because I can't remember.
No, and I'm a Bottas fan, but I can't really think of them as either. There's nothing that's really popped into my head that, that was a great overtake from Bottas. So, no, I absolutely agree. And like I said, it was a very distant third, really. It was only when Verstappen did his sort of pit stops again, but even then he went off into the distance. I know he was on the soft tyres, but he was more chasing Hamilton down than Bottas was keeping up pace with him. So yeah, kind of a weekend to technically forget, even though for Bottas, even though he did get the points for Mercedes. Now both this driver we both gave as driver of the day during the live stream, but Charles Leclerc for Ferrari. I mean, they had some shockers last year, but this was a great performance by both, because they were both ended up in the points with Carlos Sainz as well. But just a great overall performance by Leclerc, wasn't it? Managed to keep ahead of Valtteri Bottas, and then just did a solid performance throughout. Obviously came in 4th place. Bottas did beat him in the end, but yeah, great performance from him and Ferrari this weekend. I
think that might have been a sign from Leclerc to say to Red Bull and Mercedes that if you don't pick up the pace, we'll get those podium spots. We'll see if it happens throughout the season, but Leclerc hasn't won a race since Monza 2019, I think it was.
Yeah.
So it's been a while in terms of the actual F1 community. It's a long time since that race win. So I think that's good from Leclerc. It's just like I say, it's a good reminder, because he is one of the best drivers on the circuit in terms of the young generation taking over, along with Verstappen and Gasly and Ocon and all that. So it's good to see. I mean, it's not got the pace though, has it? The Ferrari, it hasn't really. Again, though, this is the battle for third, isn't it? You feel,
with McLaren,
exactly, and I think really that is the one battle to always keep an eye on these race days.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, good overall performance by Ferrari, but obviously McLaren as well. I think they got two drivers in the points. Daniel Ricciardo probably had his strongest race so far this season. Beat Lando Norris this time around in Spain, and managed to do a few overtakes. Overtook Carlos Sainz as well, who obviously a home hero, but with it being his home Grand Prix. But solid drive from Daniel Ricciardo, considering Norris has technically been the better of him from the start of this season so far.
I think that's fair, isn't it? I'd always say give someone 10 races at least to get used to the car maybe and the team around you, but Ricciardo, he gave Perez a bit of a challenge, didn't he? Perez did take over him at the end, but Ricciardo kept staying up there ahead of him and just did his bit to try and get as high as he could. You see, this is the thing. Like Lando Norris had quite a weird weekend.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he won't take it too badly because he's going to have one or two of those weekends, I think, this season. But I think he'll take it because he's had a great start. He was third in the championship ahead of this weekend, so it's not a bad thing to go on when you're ahead of at least one of the Mercedes drivers and a Red Bull driver. So well done to him on that. But yeah, Daniel Ricciardo looks more comfortable, but he's just one of those. He's an outsider. He'll have these kind of performances we don't talk much about because he's that kind of driver. But again, what I think of Daniel Ricciardo. I still find him a bit of an overrated driver. I think he's in his true colours at a team that's decent, but he won't make that team a race-winning team.
Yeah.
If you want my thoughts on that.
And Sergio Perez. I mean, obviously, we all know you're a Sergio Perez fan. In terms of his performance this weekend, I mean, obviously made up a few places, but yeah, I mean, overall, it wasn't the best thing. Especially when obviously we mentioned Valtteri Bottas, but for the team in terms of Mercedes, did get the points that were necessary, whereas maybe Red Bull were missing out once again on that second Red Bull car.
I think it's. I think from what I'm seeing from Perez this season, it's qualifying not great. It's racing spot on, which is just improving his qualifying position ahead of in the race. But his qualifying's just not good enough. I mean, we were both watching it on Saturday when he did his last lap in Q3, and even though his sectors were green, but those were just personal bests, and you just think he's still nowhere near.
His first lap, he spun round, didn't he? So he had to do. Yeah, and he didn't have a first time in Q3 because he had that incident. So he had to do. It was just a one lap really in Q3 in the end, wasn't it?
So it is down to him. It's not like it's a team problem. He's got to make sure he can get the car around the track without having to restart it. So I think for Perez, he's doing all right. I think he's just, it's his race performances that are keeping him okay at the moment. But I think at some point he needs to get his qualifying pace going if he can get it better, because you the best scenario you'd want for Red Bull is to get both your drivers in the top four ahead of a race. And then just hope that come the end of the race you've still got both of them in the top four at least, to keep that gap slim between you and Mercedes.
Yeah, and I think they missed out a bit of that, considering like Mercedes with their strategy this time round. Obviously, Bottas coming in third with the extra points for the team. Like I said, Lando Norris finished P8. First time outside the top 5 this season, so he'll be a little bit disappointed with that. But considering that's just how well of a start he's had so far this season. Alpine's Esteban Ocon and obviously AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly rounding off the final points. Now there's a bit of a fighting going on for the sort of final points position. There was Fernando Alonso fighting in there, Sebastian Vettel, Lance Stroll. Pierre Gasly as well. There was a little bit of a tussle. There was a bit of a traffic jam going on at one point during the race because they were all eyeing up for that position. I think they were holding up Valtteri Bottas at one point because Alonso and Stroll were having a bit of a tussle during that point. But in terms of Esteban Ocon, it was mentioned in the chat that somebody thought that he was having the driver of the day in terms of his performance. Good solid performance, and again outbeating Fernando Alonso.
I think it's weird because Ocon is, last season Ocon had a weird season, didn't he? It wasn't. It was kind of like you forgot he had disappeared for a year, so you kind of missed him, and then he came back. You went, oh yeah, Ocon's still around. But this season he's Yeah, Alpine. I think any good race result for them is to be in the top 10. I think because they're competing with Aston Martin. I'd say that's their rival.
Yeah.
And McLaren and Ferrari are above them. But any positions that they can get in the top 10 obviously gets them that advantage over the teams around them in the constructors. And I think for Ocon, yeah, he's making Alonso look like the secondary driver at the moment. But because at the moment Alonso's struggling to get top 10, which we always remember in his McLaren days, especially McLaren Honda days, Alonso would have a car that would make look even better.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing that at the moment with Alonso. So again, of course, he did have a year out of F1. Well, no, 2 years, sorry, out of F1. So there's that to remember. But yeah, I think at the moment, I think they might focus more on Ocon. But he is French, and it's a French team, so that helps them a bit. But yeah, Alonso, early days, but I think Alonso, the fact that it's mad to see him and Vettel fighting in the bottom 10 and not the top 10.
Quickly mention George Russell. Obviously, there was one point in the race where he was in that 10th position. Then it went to 11th, and then he trundled back down to 14th place. But again, good qualifying result from George Russell. But the car obviously isn't really capable in the race, is it, of keeping that up, of staying in the points position in Williams at the moment. So
yeah, it always feels like when he gets into the points, it's too early.
Yeah,
and then
he's peaked.
It's like you're trying to sit down on a sofa, but it keeps pulling away. That's him with the points. It's like, I'm here. Oh, it's moving again.
It keeps sliding backwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't sit down properly.
It's like it's like you're trying to chase something upstairs, but it just keeps going upstairs. It's like, when does this end?
Yeah.
When do I get to the finish line? But no, George Russell is pushing that car to its limits, and that's a proper racing driver.
In terms of Giovinazzi then, because obviously he had pit stops in general in this Spanish Grand Prix were a bit slow, weren't they, for all the teams, but I think Giovinazzi was beating everybody with his 40-second pit stop. I mean, it looked like they came out, I don't know if they realised they maybe had Kimi Raikkonen's tyres, or one of them had a puncture, so they were all running back in, and Giovinazzi was just sitting there with no wheels on his car. And I think it was around 35 seconds for his actual pit stop, like stationary. So yeah, not a great day. And that was a couple of laps in, I think, wasn't it, after the safety car? Race was ruined from there, wasn't it?
What made me laugh was the fact that it was quite interesting, because normally the cameras are on the car when they do the pit stops and they're gone straight away. Yeah. But because they had to record them going back into the garage, it looks so empty, didn't it? The garage. You forget, like, the moment they all go out of there's nothing in the garage. The cars aren't there. And it looks so empty, which that was the one thing I was realising from that. But all you had to do was put comedy Charlie Chaplin music in the background. You just see people running around like, oh my god, we messed this up. But yeah, that looked really bad. I felt sorry for them, because I would have been sweating and nervous and thinking, good God, whose fault is this now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, all of them were a bit slow, weren't they? I think Max Verstappen's was 4.2 seconds, and when Red Bull normally do sub 2 second pit stops, all of them in general, I don't know if it was the heat on the gun, or it didn't look that hot there. Sunnier than it is in the UK at the moment, and probably warmer in Barcelona. But yeah, all the pit stops were a bit weird. Quickly go on to Haas. I mean, it's the same thing. Mick Schumacher ahead of Nikita Mazepin, both of them 2 laps down. I mean, we say this every week. The least we say about Haas, really, the better, isn't it? But obviously, Mick Schumacher is still ahead of Nikita Mazepin. But yeah, Yuki Tsunoda was the only retirement in the race. I think he only managed 6 laps. Parked his car on the new turn layout for turn 10 on the Barcelona circuit. But yeah, it looked like an electrical issue, or the car just sort of turned off, and obviously that caused the only safety car to come out as well. So had a bit of a dismal qualifying session as well. Went out in Q1. And then, only managed 6 laps in this race. Not a great weekend for Yuki Tsunoda, really, was it?
No, he's having a tough start. He's having good moments, then it's not ending well, which sadly people will remember the end result and not how you do during the races or qualifying. So
he crashed in Imola as well, didn't he, in qualifying? So.
He did. But look, early days still. I'll keep saying that to some drivers, and I think you can't compare him with Gasly when Gasly's been doing F1 for what, 3-4 years now. That's a big difference. Actually this is his 4th season, so I think when you compare the two, that's not very fair. And I think for Tsunoda, I think for him it's to just finish a race, but if there's any top 10 moments that he can get, then I think that's a boost for him. But his 4th race ever in F1, let's give him time.
Yeah, no, exactly. And in terms of driver of the day, obviously we mentioned Charles Leclerc earlier. Are you sticking to that now with the podcast still?
Yeah, it's got to be. To be. I would have said Perez, but he got that last week.
You can't give it to him every week, Jamie. You can't give it to him every week.
I want to.
Quickly look at the driver standing. Obviously, that win for Lewis Hamilton helps him immensely in the driver standings. He now sits at 94 points. Max Verstappen obviously got that fastest lap as well with the 2nd place, so is 14 points behind Lewis Hamilton now. Valtteri Bottas is down in 47 points in 3rd place. So Lewis Hamilton on 94, his teammate Bottas on 47. Not a great start to the season for Valtteri Bottas. Lando Norris still in 4th. Well, he dropped down actually, but he's in 4th position now. Charles Leclerc would obviously that great drive today, and obviously getting our driver of the day, sits just 1 point behind him in 5th position. Sergio Perez in 6th with only 32 points. Daniel Ricciardo 7th. Carlos Sainz in 8th. Esteban Ocon 9th, and Pierre Gasly rounding off the top 10 in terms of the driver standings. And then in terms of Mercedes, obviously like we said, the pit strategy obviously for Lewis Hamilton to win the race, and obviously Bottas to come in 3rd place sees Mercedes top with 141 points. Red Bull Racing with 112. They really need Sergio Perez to help out in terms of their point scoring. McLaren, Mercedes are ahead of Ferrari at the minute, and like you said, it's going to be a tight battle. McLaren are only ahead of Ferrari by 5 points now. So like you said, that 3rd place is really something to be looking at this season, Jamie, isn't it, with McLaren and Ferrari?
Yeah, I think it's sadly I'd like to see them both going for it at the top, like the old days of Schumacher versus Mika Hakkinen. But no, there's a good battle there, and I think you're going to have good bad weekends with those two teams, because one moment Charles Leclerc is doing it for them, or the next minute it's Daniel Ricciardo doing it for McLaren. So 4 great drivers on paper. And the fact that they're your mid-table drivers for those 2 big teams, it's very exciting.
Yeah, and obviously there's a big gap. Obviously, like I said, Ferrari and McLaren on 60 and 65. Alpine in 5th place below them, but with 15 points. AlphaTauri in 6th with just 10 points. And Aston Martin in 7th with only 5 points. Just think of where Racing Point were last year and where Aston Martin are this season. Not been great so far for Aston Martin. Alfa Romeo, Williams and Haas all have 0 points, or nil points in terms of Eurovision. Thank you very much, Jamie, for being on the podcast. Like I said, we'll be putting a clip up as well during the week on the Let's Talk Sport channel. But like I said, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, thank you very much obviously for listening, and subscribe to Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as well if you're listening via us. We will be doing more videos during the week on the Pole Position YouTube channel, and of course be doing all the race live streams on the Let's Talk Sport channel as well, where we're hoping to do, obviously there's MotoGP as well, so if you're interested in the motorbikes, you'll be obviously doing MotoGP. We're going to be trying that out this coming week as well, or this coming weekend. And we are looking at the W Series as well. Obviously there are 8 races of the W Series during the season, and they're all intertwined with the F1 weekends. 8 rounds. The first one is at the French Grand Prix weekend, so that will be interesting to see as well. But yeah, thank you very much, Jamie, for being on the podcast.
Welcome.
A great sort of Spanish Grand Prix, and obviously Lewis Hamilton takes victory with an issue really from the Red Bull strategy team to stop Max Verstappen winning that race. But yeah, we'll see come Monaco, which is the next race, how that all fares. Like I say, it's normally what happens in qualifying is what happens in the race, but we'll see if this year's anything to go by. So thank you very much for listening and for watching, and we will see you all in the next episode. Take care. See you soon.